Well, one aspect of President George H.W. Bush's legacy that we haven't explored today is his influence on the space program. On the 20th anniversary of the Apollo 11 moon landing in 1989, President Bush announced the Space Exploration Initiative. The goal was to explore the moon and beyond.
Because the Apollo astronauts left more than flags and footprints on the moon, they also left some unfinished business. For even 20 years ago, we recognized that America's ultimate goal was not simply to go there and go back, but to go there and go on. Mike Collins said it best: the moon is not a destination, it's a direction. And space is the inescapable challenge to all the advanced nations of the earth. And there's little question that in the 21st century, humans will again leave their home planet for voyages of discovery and exploration.
Now, nearly 30 years later, private companies have joined NASA in the effort to continue that legacy. Joining us now, CBS News space analyst Bill Harwood. So, Bill, tell us more about President Bush's role in space exploration.
Well, you know, it's interesting. He was a big fan of space. He was a big supporter of NASA. But the program you just outlined was a bit premature. NASA carried out what they called a 90-day study at the time to look at the Space Exploration Initiative. And reports came down that they were saying, hey, you know what, this is a great idea, but it would probably cost $500 billion over 20 or 30 years. And of course, that wasn't anything Congress was even going to consider at that time. But it's interesting, that was on the 20th anniversary of Apollo 11. The 50th anniversary is next year, and just about everything the president called for has become national space policy, finally. The space station is built, that's one part of it, but the Trump administration has refocused NASA on returning to the moon as a stepping stone to eventual flights to Mars. And as you mentioned, bringing in the commercial industry to try to build a private sector infrastructure in space is a big part of this plan. And it's just interesting to think back on it, that it took another 30 years to make the president's vision a reality, but that's what's taking place today. You could almost move that speech to today, and it would sound like exactly what the country is set off to do. Now, whether it'll end up being funded all the way through to completion, I mean, that's an open question. It's multiple administrations, multiple Congresses, but the thrust of it, the theme, is almost the same as what the president outlined back in 1989.
Bill, you mentioned it's almost 30 years since President Bush launched that space exploration initiative. NASA's now teamed up with these private companies. They're looking to land on the moon. Give us a sense of what the latest is in this wave of exploration, and when can we expect to see that next moon landing?
Well, you know, it's interesting, Rena. The NASA was already trying to get more commercial involvement. You know, resupply missions to the space station are now carried out commercially. We have a SpaceX launch coming up Tuesday to do just that. They're also building commercial crew ferry ships to carry astronauts to and from the space station on a commercial basis. Last week, NASA announced that they're setting aside $2.6 billion. That's real money, if you will, over the next 10 years that 9 private companies are going to compete for a slice of, to build innovative low-cost landers that can carry experiments, small payloads to the surface of the moon or lunar orbit. And NASA, of course, is hoping that by helping pay for the development of this kind of commercial infrastructure, both in low Earth orbit and at the moon, that it's going to expand the private sector involvement in space, make things easier for NASA to get done, and in the end, be less expensive.
Bill Harwood, so grateful you can join us on the achievements of President George H.W. Bush in space. Thank you, Bill.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.